as time of Halloween comes around, and just because of my own beliefs, mind you, I am skeptical. Not a complete skeptic, but I do believe, like, it's weird to say. I believe that, like, ghosts and stuff like that are real to an extent. I just don't believe some of, like, the more insane shit that happens. In that sense, I'm more of a skeptic, so, like, I'm skeptical about video evidence, stuff like that. Or just, like, random noises out in the woods. I think that shit is stupid. But who cares? Because let's get into the big point of the series. So, over the next couple weeks, up until Halloween, I'll be telling everyone one story from my time that is either something I could just never explain, or something that quite literally, like, freaked me out. And maybe some plausible explanations to why I do believe they're unthinkable or unsolvable in my opinion. But let's get into that. So the first story I'm going to do today is actually my first ever story involving ghosts, slash, like, spirits, paranormal, stuff that I wouldn't be able to figure out. And this goes all the way back to when I was like 6 or 7. So, my dad's room, or his room before he moved out, and they tore out the room because they're renovating it. At the time, my uncle, who was living with them, was living in that room, and mind you, my dad was living with my mom, with my grandmother at that point. They did not have the downstairs done because 2 people live in the basement now, or 1 person lives in the basement at that time, but regardless, let's finish it. So my dad and me would have to sleep upstairs on the floor in his room. So we both had, like, blankets, and we would, layer them up and then put 1 blanket over us. So, one night we were just sleeping around. We just had gone to sleep. It was like 11 o'clock at night. Not too insane of a time span. But one thing I noticed was that that I hadn't realized was that there's a massive hole in one of the door frames, and one of the pillars. So in the room, there's like this one little support pillar that just sticks out right after you walk into the door, and it's right before the closet. It sticks out from the door entrance because the door entrance is closer inwards to the house, as where the closet sticks like somewhat outwards, which is kind of weird. Regardless, due to some anger or whatever, I don't know the exact story of how it happened, but basically somebody managed to punch a hole in that wall. And like I said, inside it was just a hollow beam with some plaster stuff and, like, a few other, like, materials just blocking it. Which was weird for me, but, whatever. And before I finish the rest of this, I will give this one thing. I did not have sleep paralysis. And this is the only time I've had anything that would, even anywhere near go to sleep paralysis. But the thing with it is that I was also able to move the entire time. And I could recognize everything going around, even, like, I could recognize that it was real. Because the fact is that I didn't just do, like, a single, I guess, like, look at it. I looked at it afterwards because I'd re-woken up after what had happened, like, 10 minutes later. And everything was in the exact same way it had been. So if I was sleeping and stuff like that, it would have been a bit hard to figure out. But regardless, y'all can rate off sleep paralysis if you want. Let's get into what happened. So I'd heard, like, some crackling, which, obviously would make sense for that to happen. I'm in an old room, and that old room had also had, a hole in it, and a couple of holes. That mainly is just that hole, and it's crackling, which makes sense because you have old sheetrock falling apart. So I was like, me being the little kid that I was like, you know what, let's just look at it, let's see what it is. And I saw movement. Not very much movement, but it just seemed like, maybe some like little baby animal or something, or like, I don't know how to describe it, just like something really small moving along in there. And I was confused. I was like, what, is there like a mouse in here or something? Because I was terrified of mice as a kid. Nowadays I can play around with mice all I want and I don't care. But yeah, so I was terrified at that point. But I look, again, like I look more closely, and I see a face. Now mind you, not like a, I wouldn't even call it like a human face. It looked almost, it's hard to describe. It was human, but it just seemed off. Like, I'm trying to think, like from like a quick memory glance, I can say it looked almost similar to a, to like one of those Native American slash like, yeah, just Native American like masks, if you guys have ever seen them. What they look like, those masks, like it looked similar to that, but it was also a bit more human shaped instead of being like actually just an overbloated mask. Now like I said, as a kid obviously this just confused me, I wasn't even scared. But then it began to move and contort in a way that I couldn't understand, like folding in on itself slightly and constantly like distorting itself. And what really shook it off was the fact that the mouth of the thing, whatever it wasn't even really like a mouth, it was like just like a hole, decided to start moving. And I immediately, and I'm not even shitting this, I didn't shit my pants or anything like that, thankfully. What I did do was I immediately turned around, put my head under my dad, because my dad was the one facing the wall. I wasn't. I was sleeping behind him, so I just put my back to the wall, hugged close up to him, and that was it. The next morning, nothing had happened. I'd said that I'd seen something, but there was nothing there. And ever since then, I've been skeptical of that hole in the wall. And this is where I'm actually going to go into another thing. Although this one was a bit more scary to some people, although this isn't directly my story, this was a story from someone I knew, being my family at the time. So they had been, so that hasn't been the first time that they've seen, like, objects that aren't good, like, objects that shouldn't be there, and also, like, people in weird, I guess, like, you'd say, like, a weird sense of inanimate objects doing something wrong. Another great example, like I said, was at the basement, where both my aunts used to live, and then my aunt and uncle when I was growing up. Both of them, because they switched rooms a lot. Those people were living there in those rooms. Now, what makes it important is the fact that, so at the bottom of the stairs, and this was before I was even living there, I hadn't gotten to see this. It had a picture, like a painted picture of, or a painting, I guess you'd call it still, of somebody known as, Jesus Christ, if anyone doesn't know who that is, then, oh boy. But regardless, so, I see a picture, so there was a painting of him. Now, our stairs had like a little alcove to the left where there was like supposed to be like a closet of some sort. So, and we would barely use the closet for anything, it was just like storage if we really needed it. But that was basically like what it was. And towards like the bottom of the stairs, the painting was hung. Now the thing is that the painting, like, looked fine, right? Like if you looked at it through a picture, it was fine. It was only when you looked at it through, like in real life, that you started having issues. Obviously you have, the constant of all these sort of like cursed or like haunted painting type deals, which is eyes, like, the eyes following you. They have that. But also, whenever people would, like, whenever they would spot the eyes, or they would, like, say anything bad about it, like, if they said, fuck this painting, something like that, or, like, fuck you, or they would try and move it in any way, shape, or form, then, objects around the house, like, objects around, in the bathroom would start moving, among other things. So, like, sometimes stuff would just fall over randomly. You'd have times where doors would just be in the wrong position. One of the biggest ones being that sometimes the door would just, I'm not really sure how to explain it, but the door would, like, what would hold the door in place, like the latch and stuff like that, would just partially give way, so, like, the door would just, it wouldn't open, but it would just be, like, you could literally just tap the door and it would be open. And stuff like that, which would only happen, like, it never happens anymore, and we still have the same old door. It only happened whenever people talk shit about the painting. Which was the strangest part, is that the painting seemed to follow, like, the eyes seemed to follow you, and there was an eerie presence about it. But what the weirdest thing was, is, like I said, that there were so many other things that would happen if you messed with it. Which is what made it believable for me, is that there were so many times where people would literally just, like, people in my family would either, like, comment badly on the painting, saying, like, the painting would, like, looked creepy, or, like, why the hell do we still have this, like, stuff like that, and immediately creepy stuff would start occurring. Weirdly enough, I've never had, for at least for the first incident, I never had the first incident ever occur again. Though I did notice something quite strange, and that is that, every couple of, I think it was, like, trying to think of it, mind you, because it's kind of difficult to figure out, from memory like this, every once in a while I would hear noise coming from it, and, the timing would always be between 11 to 1 a.m., and I know this because I stay up a lot, past then when I was living with my dad, but, every once in a while, and I didn't tell anyone about this either, but I wouldn't say like a liquid almost, but almost like oilish, would sometimes appear, like, not even very much of it either. It'd be like, maybe like a few drops, like it looked like somebody was walking around with their drink and they, like, and, you know, just like the tiniest tip of the top spilled over into it, like the very smallest bit. And then obviously, you know, it confused me, like, why is there liquid in here? And there's, like, the sheetrock, if you guys don't know, has, like, paper at the bottom. That paper and the sheetrock absorb water like no tomorrow. So why would there be even liquid at the surface unless it's an oil? The issue is around the times when this would happen, we had already finished making dinner, and there was only two oil-like substances ever used. Or ever even had in the building. Or, sorry, in our room. One was grease, which you would think would make sense, but then when you look at it, it doesn't either, because grease would only come from food. The issue is that I would sit in a chair around like 5 feet away from it, and I would never walk in front of it. My dad sits all the way on the opposite side of the room from it, so there's no way for us to get grease inside of it whatsoever. Secondly would be oil, like vegetable oil, which at the end of like a couple, like last year, we had vegetable oil kept on a shelf like 2 feet away from it. The issue is that doesn't work either, because it's always capped, and we never open any of them inside the room. So it's just confusing looking at this, because you're like, what can physically cause this? Like, there's no explanation that works, because there's nothing in here that could have caused it. Unless somebody was, like, going into our room, which wouldn't work either, because we were awake, and nobody would enter the room, so how is there getting this oil at the bottom? But other than that weird occurrence that happens all the time, we never got anything more. There was never any more, how do I say this? There was not any really weird occurrences outside of that. Like I said, the painting had also been gotten rid of at one point, so we can't. So that didn't happen anymore, but it was just really strange thinking, like, looking back at it with, like, a critical eye is, like, I can obviously write it off, like, a lot of it off as, like, you know, just weird, like, you know, like, stuff falling over, stuff just getting put into a weird place, especially, like, the family stuff. But the thing is that everything that I've seen, everybody is having the same things happen. Everybody's having the same feelings. And what makes that really strange is that, like, my dad, obviously, you know, he believes that, you know, spirits in some form or fashion are a thing, but he doesn't, like, he doesn't necessarily believe in, like, the ghosts, like, some of the ways that people think ghosts exist.
We have lost objective Duff.
And then most of the rest of my family is skeptics. So how does that work? You know, how are we getting, you know, these same testimonies and talks about one object from multiple different people who, by the way, do not agree on everything a lot of the time, and they all corroborate the exact same experiences, when all of these experiences would seem out of place, completely out of place. So, I don't know. There's a few other weird things that's happened in the house, but nothing, like, big. One thing, though, I will say, before I end this video, because this will be, like, the one for, like, my dad's house, I guess will be, like, the special for this. The forest. So, in between our house and, so we have 3 houses bordering us. So we have one house, which is a house that, is owned by our neighbors, Mike, and his wife, who I keep forgetting her name. But they own that house, and there used to be people before us, but they weren't too special. They were just, like, you know, the average neighbors. And there used to be a fence right there, blah, blah, blah. They're, like, just directly to the left of us. Then you have directly behind us, because there's another road that, like, pays off and goes into it. They have a pond and a massive field. Now, in between, on our right side, there is a, well, there's a house, like, way down a bit further through, like, a little forest patch. And we also have our pool on that side. Well, if you go direct, like, diagonally down, and you go straight, like, diagonally, to the right from, like, if you're facing directly right at the house, diagonally right back, like, facing in between the house with the pond and the house, far back, there's just a forest that goes on for miles. And the thing is that, like, it's strange because at night you can hear a lot of stupid things, like, it's not even, like, if you have, like, fires going or stuff like that, it's nothing, but when you're in the silence of it, like, even, like, a good example is, at one point we had to do, we were getting firewood, and the pool was getting, because we were taking down the pool, we were getting the wood for it, and we were just throwing the boards into the fire. Makes sense. But as soon as you went over there, you could hear things, like, not even, like, overly scary things, but just, like, you could hear, like, a voice or two every now and then. You could see things, as well, like a shadow at the corner of your eye. And you would think, like, oh, you know, that's just, you know, the mind playing tricks on you. Well, if I could have taken a picture, I would have, but let's just say I've had my fair share of seeing things out in those woods. And some of them, oh my god. Let's just say this. If I'm going directly right towards the neighbor's house, I feel fine. But I go more than 50 feet into those woods, like 50 feet on the ground in those woods, like diagonally, and I go any farther than that, I'm already alert for something. Because there's something in those woods somewhere. I don't know what it is. I don't really care what it is, because I'm not gonna go there. But regardless, it's just it's strange because it's right next to where the pool is as well. In which our pool has also had some unfortunate things, like every single year our filter will sometimes fail. Um, the strangest one being that we had one year where, or well, no, it was a couple years in a row where yeah, it was a couple years in a row where we had algae, right? Like, you know, your standard algae. The issue is that when we tried to clean it, the algae would literally grow back worse than before, even with stuff that would, like, take care of algae, and among other things. Another big one was, constantly, I mean this constantly, you would have, you would have a lot of, like, you just have a lot of strange occurrences with the pool as well, on specific situations. But I'm not going to go into those too much, but just standard stuff you would think of in like a ghost tale or stuff like that, like objects moving, sometimes like stuff falling or breaking when it shouldn't. I know one of the biggest ones, like one of the biggest like breaking things was my cousin, we were in the pool together, you know, just chilling out, and all of a sudden the whole like look of the pool seemed off, like it seemed to almost change color, and immediately I tried getting out, and no matter what I did, I would just slip. Like the entire like pool top, like the stairs to get out the pool, covered in something like not even gelatinous, but more just like slick. I would say as for equivalent, it'd basically be like lathering like highly melted butter onto it, and then having it stick like slime to the actual steps. Like, it was just weird. And then when we tried climbing out, like from like the sides, because I can reach up and climb over the sides of it if I want to, a whole chunk of the paneling just gave way, and I wasn't even grabbing onto the paneling. I was grabbing onto the wood above the paneling, and the whole paneling just gave way. It just like in the middle of all this. So like I said, I don't know. Hopefully you guys enjoyed me just talking about some quick stories. The ones that you'll probably really enjoy will be coming out next week, or maybe earlier this week, depending on how many people like it. But yeah, so that story will be about my grandmother's house and some of the weird things that have happened there. Not all of them paranormal based, but some of them. A lot of them having to do with the fact that our house is a renovated house that was built, like, we had additions over the base house, which was like a small, really small cottage at the time. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you guys do want me to talk about more stuff like this, like, you know, personal stories, stuff like that, please tell me. I have no problem with it. Obviously I'm not going to make like a whole YouTube channel around it, because I don't like story channels, but I do like telling stories sometimes. And just, you know, saying stuff, or talking about some of the stuff that I've witnessed, or that I think is like a reasonable thing I've witnessed. No, you guys tell me your opinion. So yeah, so this is this one's 520. Like I said, as for a like goal, I don't know. We barely get over like 5 likes a video, so I'm gonna say this as a goal. If we can get 10 likes on this video, I will indefinitely do a video much faster. With all that, though, this is Desmond520 signing off.